Now, on the S4 sponsor stage is the session from Phoenix Contact. Please welcome Field Application Specialist Tyler Burke to the S4 sponsor stage.
Hi guys, my name is Tyler Burke and I'm representing Phoenix Contact here. So when it comes to industrial security, Phoenix Contact offers a series that we call our mGuard or Machine Guard, and that's really what I'm going to be talking today about, is how this can fit in to specific applications with different customers. So a little bit about myself. I've been hearing a lot about these guys who are all cybersecurity experts. I'm much more of a Phoenix Contact expert. I've been with Phoenix for 8 years. I know all of our products. I figured out routing and port forwarding when I was a kid because I really wanted to game and, Napster, all that stuff. And you know what? I knew from a very young age that I was never going to go into IT because I hated being my local IT department. There's nothing more frustrating to me than having my parents call me asking me for printer driver help. And so it's really funny that life has led me down this path where I decided to go after control systems most of my life, and now I'm securing control systems, so I'm kind of bleeding the IT that I've always been kind of pushing away from, but I understood, and mixing it with the passion that I actually liked, which was a lot more industrial control. So about Phoenix Contact, we are a German company. We have manufacturing in US, Germany, and in China. When it comes to our cybersecurity division, this isn't something that Phoenix Contact was really strong in, and so we did what most other big companies do, is we found a smaller company and we bought them, right? You buy the knowledge you don't understand. So our cybersecurity division was actually initially called Innominate. They were established in 2001, and in 2008 we purchased them, and so for the last basically 10, 11 years, we've been running this division. We offer a complete portfolio from 19-inch, all the way down to DIN rail. But make no mistake, Phoenix Contact, we cut our teeth on the factory floor. We do have 19-inch rack mount, but we're not going to compare with like a Juniper's or an HP or something like that. We don't have any email scanning or things like that. Our protocols are geared towards ICS, and that's what we understand. We understand the factory floor. When you speak Modbus, I know what to do. When you speak email, I have no idea what to do. And so I'm going to talk to you about a customer that we have in Canada. And this customer is, they're actually a national customer. They stretch across many provinces. So the application that they came to us with was needing to secure industrial sites. So it's a really simple application. They have locks throughout, the wastewater, or sorry, throughout the waterways all across Canada. And so they have to make sure, okay, open and close gates, raise and lower water levels, let boats pass through. So fundamentally, the application isn't very complicated, right? Because it's just a few locks opening and closing and then water level rising and shutting. But it's critical because obviously this is the transportation industry. So they actually, the rules and regulations around this industry are federally regulated, and because it's considered transportation, they get held to the same standard that the aerospace industry, so airports get held to. And so their cybersecurity has to be top notch. When we were working with this company, we realized right away that they have their own 10 subnet, and they've, allocated IP addresses for their control system. So they already had some separation, which is nice, because I've walked into places before where it's a flat network, and you can see that, Joe from accounting can somehow turn on or off the PLC by mistake, and I don't like seeing that ever. So the difficulty that we were facing was that the customer was using Modbus TCP. I'm sure you guys are all well aware of the fragility of Modbus TCP. It's a great protocol because it's totally open, but then it's awful because it's totally open, right? It's kind of like that double-edged sword of everybody can understand how to break it, but then also everyone knows how to make a device that works on Modbus TCP. So when we worked with this customer, our solution was really simple. We introduced a security appliance, our mGuard device, and with this security appliance, we put it into something called stealth mode. So it's basically an inline firewall. So now we're acting as a firewall. We can enable denial of service attacks. We can prevent those. We can prevent lots of bad traffic from coming into the network. On top of that, we added in VPN. Now, when this system was initially built, we basically did a test run of a handful of cells, and then we kind of rolled that up. And so over time, the network kept getting bigger and bigger. Everything was initially configured through a simple web page, but you can imagine that as the networks grow, having a web page access for every single device might not be the best idea. The other problem that we ran into was that the initial batch, had a firmware of whatever, and as we were getting new devices, the people in charge really liked everything to be on the same firmware. So it was easier to take new devices and downgrade the firmware than it was to get the old devices and upgrade the firmware. So we were actually downgrading the firmware on devices as we went along. Again, this is not a great design constraint, but that's what happens. And so that was a solution that Phoenix offered, and honestly, it was a fine solution, but that was back in 2010, right? We're in 2019 now, nearly said 18. And you have to be careful because now attackers are much more intelligent, and the world is, a much more harsh place. So currently, we have to imagine there's over 150 to 200 sites. Everything was installed with pre-shared keys at the time. And again, it was just done out of a matter of necessity. You need to get something running really quickly. Well, pre-shared keys are going to be the common denominator. They're always the easiest thing to use. The problem, as everybody knows, is that pre-shared keys are not very secure. There's no digital handshaking or anything like that, right? It's not like a certificate that has some authentication behind it. The other problem, as I was mentioning, was the firmware. As we were adding new sites, we had to continually downgrade the firmware. And so the customer eventually came back to us and said, these are our problems, here's our constraints, and it's the same problems that you might have for a lot of end users. We now have this massive base that's installed. How can we manage this? How do we back it up? How do we make sure that if there was something that happened, like a critical downtime, we can recover and replace the devices as needed? So this is where we entered our mGuard device manager. So what this is it's a central command and control center for all of our routers, security appliances. And so with this, we are able to do a lot of different unique tools. So replacement of old devices. This software can go out and reach every single device on the network and pull in their configurations. So now we can create backups. We have to replace devices. It's really easy to just take the configuration, dump it onto an SD card, and then you can hand that to an electrician or a technologist. And now we're saving a lot of time because we're not having people out in the field who are actually doing the wiring. They don't have to dial in with a laptop and set anything up. They can just get running right away. Another really nice ability is the ability to do templates. So if I have 50 devices, I can group them however I would like, and then dump them in. And then again, the ability to isolate devices based on firmware. These are all really important things. Now, we've heard a lot to talk about of firmware. The problem with firmware is obviously we want to be running the latest and greatest at all times. But updating devices one at a time is always a problem. So what really helps us is that we can do a centralized firmware by controlling our own repository. And I think that this is the way that a lot of manufacturers are going to have to go in the future, is offering their customers mass firmware updating, and then it's either got to be that or automatic. The problem with automatic is, what if it updates when you're doing something critical? The other really nice feature that we offer is that our firmware is digitally signed. So you can't just take our firmware, manipulate it, and dump it back in. And there's massive problems all over the internet that you can read about, like VPN filter, where that's happening, where people are actually modifying firmware and then compromising security. And we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. And so that's why when you are selecting a manufacturer, even if it's not Phoenix, but let's be honest, it should be Phoenix, you want to make sure that they take these things to heart. So digitally signed firmware, ability to upgrade, ability to upscale with your application. And the last point that was really important to our customer is making sure that our firmware was non-destructive. We don't want to destroy everything, we want everything to remain. Now, in the last presentation, we heard a lot about CAs and the CA handling. So what our approach to CAs is that we can give you a self-signed certificate, and our units can actually work with self-signed certificates. Again, self-signed certificates have their own drawbacks, right? They're not verified, so that's the biggest drawback. What we can do is we can either replace the CA entirely with something that you trust, or you can cross-sign the CA certificate with your own trusted certificate. That way you can guarantee that everything runs the way that you want. And so since we've done that, we can now say that everything is running with and we replaced pre-shared keys across the board with AES 256 encryption using certificates. So this is the slide that I really want to pay attention to. It's all about defense in depth, right? As soon as we do something like adding on this mGuard device manager, what we're doing now is we're opening up a whole new target vector, right? If I'm an attacker, it doesn't make sense for me to attack every single security device. No, I want to attack something that has every security device already. So when we're working with this customer, we had to make sure, okay, how are you going to protect this network? And what they did was they had a secure IT perimeter, right? And we didn't get involved in that. That's their own network. Then they had their industrial perimeter. They had control zones, physical security, making sure that there's locks, gates, cameras, everything like that to prevent people from physically going to a site and manipulating a site, as well as getting to where the device manager is located. And then for the mGuard device manager itself, what happened is we had to have multi-factor authentication. So working with this customer, we set up secure VM. They were running it on a platform that is only accessible, like physically accessible, from one terminal. The biggest part with defense in depth is understanding that you can't use one manufacturer. Again, my background is much more from the machine building. Like I've worked with in like a lot of automotive departments, and where you see that when you're working with them is that anytime you're doing safety, you always use like a safety processor. You use two dissimilar processors. And the reason for that is now if there's ever a bug or something that trips up one of the processors, the other one won't be affected. And although Phoenix might not like it, my personal opinion is that you should do the same thing when it comes to security. You should use multiple routers, and they should be different vendors. And so now if somebody can break through one vendor, the odds are, hopefully the second vendor is something they haven't seen before, right? Making sure that something that can critically destroy one router or security device doesn't do the same thing to another security device like a firewall. And that can be malicious packets or like denial of service or whatever. So looking at defense in depth on the prevention side, there's lots of things that you can do in order to protect people. So in our application, we were looking at protecting them with we were using IPsec, so we were encrypting layer 4 up. We had layers 2 and 3 were protected by our firewall. On top of that, you can add in deep packet inspection. So this specific customer was using Modbus. So you can Modbus again. There's lots of deep packet inspection tools available. You can restrict reads and writes. It doesn't matter though if it's Ethernet IP or Profinet. You still want to add in something that can understand the protocol level and really restrict access. The nice part about this was that every single device, we put like a VPN in front of every device. So now all these different devices that need to communicate back and forth are all encrypted. If you were to plug in and do a PCAP of the network, you're not going to see a single thing in clear text. Now, again, not everybody would have the budget to do that in this application. Looking at the next area is going to be detection, right? Prevention is only ever part of the battle. And it's great if you can stop someone from getting in, but then the question is, what happens when they do get in? How do I know if somebody is in the network? And so there's lots of different tools available, and again, this is just working with the customer and telling them, okay, here's what we can offer, and here's here's the expertise that you can do. You can do something like honeypots, where if somebody goes in the network and they scan your device, it'll set off a trigger. From the Phoenix standpoint, what we offer is we have something called a CIFS integrity monitoring. So we can actually scan share files. So it's a very simple idea, right? You scan a share file, you build a checksum, you take that checksum and you digitally sign it so you know that no one can manipulate it, and then you repeat the process as often as you'd like. So the nice part about doing this checksum-based security is now we can guarantee nothing's changed, right? So you can imagine if you take something like a C drive, you scan the entire drive, the only files you'd ever need to exclude are going to be like logs and trends because those are always changing. But then you pay special attention to if a driver file changes. So a different example, working with another customer, I had them install this device on a machine in China, and when the machine got to China, they kept breaking the machine. What they found out was through this integrity monitor, there was a DLL file being modified, and it was actually a sound file because they were installing the Chinese equivalent of iTunes on their PC, and that was bricking the PC. And so you'll see like lots of silly problems, right? They thought that it was like a critical thing that was happening to their machine, and it was, user error. And so, my apologies. I thought that that's animated. I thought it was going to run. And so, yeah, you can see like user errors can be a big problem. These CIFS files, you can actually scan Linux or Windows-based machines. And again, another big growing trend that I've seen, at least in the market, was that a lot of PLC manufacturers are starting to now run with higher level languages. From the Phoenix perspective, our PLC runs on Linux now. I know that some of the other big vendors, starting with an S that's blue, I've seen that theirs runs has a Windows background. I've seen that the S that's green runs on Linux as well. So we're starting to see this convergence of operating systems. And as this is happening, right, we're trying to make our machines smarter. Well, as we do that, we need to make sure that we also don't open up security holes, right? A lot of PLCs now are coming with firewalls built into them, and I can tell you firsthand that from the people that I'm working with, their first step is they turn off the firewall because it makes it harder for them to do their job. And so it's, again, going to be this big battle of education. Defense in depth is never going to be one device. It's never going to be install this $10,000 device and everything will work. It's always going to be lots of layers of protection. You never want to have a system that's like a big coconut, and if you smash it, it's really soft inside. You want it to be more like an onion where you have to peel away every single layer to get to whatever it is you're trying to get to. So that's, I think I talk a little bit too fast, guys, but I'm a bit ahead of schedule. If you guys have any questions, yeah?
You mentioned this is a critical infrastructure. Was the IT group involved heavily, or was this they kind of lead the operational folks on their own?
So what ends up happening with this specific company was that IT is not really, it's a very broadly defined term. The IT is actually segmented into many silos. And so they have IT, but IT is like, they have a few guys who do emails, a few guys who do all these other divisions. This specific department was the cybersecurity division. So they do not separate cybersecurity for IT and OT. It's just cybersecurity. And we're actually pretty lucky because the guy who runs the division has a background where he went to school first for machine, and so he had an understanding of PLCs, but he switched his major halfway through and then carried on being more on the cybersecurity front. So he understood the fragility of everything, and from his point of view, he just wanted to encrypt it all, right? If I add in encryption on every single device, I do not have to worry about someone doing a network scan and realizing how my network is laid out. And again, like I said, it was like all divided into many zones. So the IT was very separated from the OT, and it was kind of a lot closer to what you would consider like the classical Purdue model is how the architecture was built. They don't have anything cloud-based, and I don't think they were moving towards that at all. Any other questions?
Can you kind of brush over stealth mode a little bit? Is that the only way you can use it, or can you maybe go over that?
Yeah, for sure. So our device, like as I was saying, it's a security appliance. It has many options, so you can use it as a standard router, splitting up subnets. But I mean, everybody has routers, and so the stealth mode, the reason why it fit into this specific application was because they didn't want to alter the subnet. And they didn't want to, they had a system that's working, and if it was a new system, it would make a lot of sense to use devices in a router mode. The problem was that they, if it ain't broke, you don't fix it. And it's that age-old mentality. They just wanted to modify the system while it's running. One thing that I should have mentioned that I didn't was that because, I'm from Canada and the system is built on water, we actually have 3 months a year where the entire lake freezes, so we can do whatever we want. So we have 3 months to figure out everything, but by the time the 3 months is over, it has to be functional again because we can't, you can't pause time. Any other questions? Yep.
Radio communications at all?
So no, they do not trust radio communications. It was kind of their own how they design their network. Their network actually has a fiber backbone. And again, you got some money, you might as well put in fiber. Anything else? Well, perfect, guys. Thank you all for your attention. Again, my name is Tyler Burke. There's a few other people around here from Phoenix Contact. We have, lots of different solutions, lots of applications. This was only one that was more on the water, transportation side. We get into applications on like water, wastewater, discrete manufacturing, process, oil and gas. So if you have any questions on how you might, tackle solutions in another vertical, just come and talk to us. We understand fully, the solution that I presented today is only going to work for an end customer. If you're an OEM, the idea of having this centralized command and control center wouldn't make any sense because you don't own the products after a certain amount of time, right? So and that's another big part of the architecture, is making sure that as you're designing it for the market that you're in. End customer, really easy because they own all the devices. OEMs and machine builders are very different.